Welcome to Catch 22. Let me introduce the Somerville City Council President, Ward 1 City Councilor, Matt McLaughlin.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me again. It was just a few months ago that we came by, so I won't make any big speeches, but a couple quick updates as since then. My wife and I have a new baby boy in our lives. I'm not sure if you can see, you can't see it at all. William McLaughlin, who's now 6 months old. So happy to have a new Somerville resident in there. Then I also started a job with the Department of Labor, their VETS program, which helps homeless veterans seek reemployment. So that's a great job that I started in August. So there's been a lot going on. Had a baby and a job in August. Big election in November. We have a new mayor. About half of the city council is a brand new. And this will be my third consecutive year as president, which I was asked to do. I was not planning on doing it, but I am glad to have the opportunity because now I'm able to get a new generation of counselors kind of on the page of what I'm trying to do, which is just run meetings efficiently and get the practical things done and focus on the things we can actually accomplish. And I do have a little bit of a cold in case people are wondering why I sound a little off. Just a reminder that there's more than just COVID out there. So that's all I have. I'm interested in talking to everybody, and we'll save time and just ask people how they're doing and what they're thinking.
If I may start it off, you gave an excellent inaugural address. You spoke about progressive issues and a progressive agenda and a progressive electorate and city council. Could you talk a little bit about what that means in the next year or two?
Well, I think it means that, I think, how do I explain? You'd have to go and watch the entire speech for me to explain it all over again. But basically, I find that for the most part, people in Somerville are all on the same page when it comes to values. And because of that, sometimes people seek to find things to divide over. So we don't really have this left-right divide like the rest of the nation has. So we have kind of a left-left divide. And that's what I was trying to address, is just pointing out that we all have more in common than what we have against each other. And if we focus on the things we have in common, we can get a lot done. So that was the message of my speech. And it's basically looking at the things like affordable housing is an issue that everyone says they support, they want to address, and yet we always have trouble accomplishing our goals on that. So that's probably the number one example, but there are many examples of issues that most people in Somerville will agree on. And I just don't want to become a city that is so focused on the things we don't agree on that we don't get anything done. Oh, I think you're muted.
People would raise their hand when they would like to ask a question.
Like physically raise your hand, Steve?
There you go. Either way, you can do it digitally or physically.
Got it. Okay, I'll do it the old school way. Hi, Matt.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for joining us today. I think the context of your address and your little recap right here, very relevant in not just intercity or intracity perceptions and communication, but as I found, because our business is in many ways dependent on people coming into the city, right? So people who don't live here. Most of our employees live in the city or around the city, within a neighboring town or two, mostly. But one of the things, and one of the things we're trying to figure out, even as a communication for people who are coming in, and the hospitality business has been really crippled you know, through COVID. That's, you know, a lot of businesses have had pain. You know, Boston, Massachusetts ranks still in the bottom 3 or 4, depending on what month you look like, which month you look at in terms of devastating to pre-COVID times. So we are in a really, really slow crawl out of this. And one of the things that we want to do, and we've heard this because of, you know, the perception of the, you know, the heavy, the intense, if you will, protections during the COVID period and all that kind of stuff, is that we were having some of our regular guests, and again, mostly domestic regional travelers, whatever, who weren't staying with us because it was like it was, because, you know, it was perceived as being onerous and got to close the pool, can't have your restaurant open, all those kinds of things, whatever. And so, and this is without, you know, with me being a person who, I got it, you know, I understood it. And I understood the fact that Somerville was a city making an example above and beyond what a lot of other cities and towns were doing in the Commonwealth. And so supporting it didn't help business. But we're looking to do some stuff that would even be informational in the lobby. Because the image of the Somerville, obviously really important to our clientele, whether or not they're business travelers or leisure travelers coming from other parts of New England. But we've got a unique opportunity to communicate the very magnanimous things that Somerville embodies and embraces and all that kind of stuff. And that piece of it, what you've addressed, the communication within the cities, whether or not they're business people, residents, doesn't matter, you know, is really an important thing. That there is, to your point, there's a lot more commonality in thought than there is, differences. And so we're really looking to communicate that with our guests, and that is by way of some kind of communications in the lobby through posters and some things that we hand out and stuff like that. So I'm just, you know, as we're climbing out of this, and I think as the months continue on, we'll do a little bit better and a little bit better. But you know, I've taken some snippets of what your address was. I don't have we don't have a fully translated, documented copy of it, whatever, but there's some really good nuggets in there. And especially as we sit in your ward, it's helpful that way. But I think your message is, and this is more of a statement than it is a question. It really is important, and it's important for people who visit and have visited and become people who come to appreciate staying in our city, that there is an understanding of this alignment, because it does get represented at times as that there is disalignment there. And I think, to your point, as I said before, there's more alignment than there is differences. And so it's an important point that you make. And we're, again, trying to come up with ways to be able to translate that and communicate that to our guests, because when there's that support with that, it's good for business. And we're in a precarious situation right now as business is very, very slowly starting to return. So more of what you're saying, I think, is necessary, and across the board with the leadership in the city is really important. So again, more of a statement than it is a question.
Yeah, and I'd say to most of your statement is, we'll see what the mayor decides to do, because a lot of times on the city council level, especially when it comes to public health issues, it's usually the mayor and the board of health that make these decisions. And you know, there was the vaccine mandate went to the board of health and was rejected, which just surprised me, just because you're used to the board of health doing exactly what the mayor says on any particular issue. So I thought that was interesting, and I do think Boston is now looking at removing their vaccine mandate because Omicron is settling down. So hopefully we've been saying this for the past 2 years or so, but
Yeah,
hopefully
yeah.
we'll be getting back to normal soon.
I'm with you. All right, thanks.
Right. Thank you, Lou. Looking around, is there anybody else that has a question or comment? Mr. Selby, Sean Selby.
Hi, Matt. Question for you. I know most of the talk around the city is concerning Union Square and that area, Boynton Yards, et cetera. I have a question about something closer to your ward in East Somerville and perhaps across on the other side of the highway from East Somerville. What do you think is important to the new city council, the new mayor, the constituents in terms of new development and or continuing development? Because there's still a lot to do in those regards. There's still a lot of projects out there that could be done. I'm curious what you're seeing as what are the important things?
Well, I'd say for me, one of the important things I've been working on for a couple of years now, and I'll hopefully be introducing something this year, which has actually been assisted by Charlie Baker's housing bill, which is allowing more housing density by the T lines, by transit lines. It's something I've talked about for a few years now. I've been working with the city planning department on it, and I hope to introduce something this year that would allow more housing and more affordable housing close to the T lines. For my neighborhood, I've just had 2 development meetings last week in Innerbelt Road, which is really one of the last areas that are just ripe for development. And I've asked the city numerous times over the years to develop a master plan for Innerbelt Road because we know that people are going to show interest in this. And now we have multiple developers looking to build down there. So I think we really need to take a look at what we're trying to accomplish in Innerbelt Road. Don't make it piecemeal and have kind of a better vision for what we want to do with this last piece of undeveloped land. And then Assembly, they should be coming out with a revised master plan soon as well, because there's a lot more land in Assembly that the city wants to develop. I'd say they're about, if I just judging by the eyes, about 50% complete, because there's still a lot of land down in Assembly that can be developed. So there's a lot of opportunities around. We just have to manage it correctly and make sure that it's working to the advantage of the residents.
As a follow-up to that,
Sure.
I've noticed over the last 3 or 4 years, even short span of time, the parking requirements go down, just almost to nothing. And, you know, like I say, 4 years ago, you could have stood in front of the planning board or in front of neighborhoods meetings, and people ask where the cars go. Everybody's got 2 cars, right? And today we're hearing things from even the planning staff saying that there should be no above grade parking anywhere on your site, which is, I feel a little whiplash. And so I'm curious if you can, you know, predict where that's going, and you know, what does the city look like when most of the development that's happening is being directed to not provide parking or provide very minimal parking.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting subject because I think we talked about this at the last chamber meeting. And I remember at my very first chamber meeting as a city councilor, people were actively encouraging to get rid of parking minimums completely, or parking minimums in exchange for parking maximum. And that was coming from developers who felt that the parking requirements were too onerous on them, and that their argument was they could build more housing, build more affordable units if they didn't have to build these parking spaces. So it was a financial constraint to them. And then we now have a lot of transit activists who don't want parking because they want to encourage people to walk and to bike and to use public transportation. And then we went so far as on the council, we viewed this as a compromise, and some people didn't like it, was if we're going to say to the developer, and again, it was developers who wanted to be released from the parking requirements. And we kind of said, okay, you can be relieved from your parking requirements, but your residents are not going to get a parking sticker if you're not going to build parking. And we viewed that as a compromise. Not everybody liked it that much. But I do think, I see Cambridge is doing the same now. They're moving to get rid of parking minimums completely. And I do think there has to be space for parking. But when you mention Union Square in particular, there was a recent fight over that where there was a compromise reached to have some parking, but not have it be overwhelming. It is concerning to think that we have so many traffic problems now and we want to build thousands of new units, create thousands of new jobs. That means thousands of new cars. So it is a concern to keep having these parking requirements and encouraging people to drive from outside the city in particular. So it's a balancing act is the easiest way to say it. Is I do think we have to start reducing the amount of parking spaces we have because it just encourages more driving, but also be realistic about it and know that we have to have some parking in certain situations.
Tom Bent and then Adam Portney after Tom.
Thanks, Steve. Hey, Matt, how you doing?
Doing all right. How you doing, Tom?
Good. When you brought up Innabelt, we're down here, and I think one of the things that has always constrained development down here is the tubes, and I think in any discussion that's when you talk about anything with development down beyond the tubes, which is where most of it would be, there has to be a dialogue with the T, and I think everyone knows, the history there was that was a temporary installation that was done like 30 some odd years ago. Do you know if, and I know, when Mayor Curtatone was there was some discussion with the Green Line trying to get mitigation to, get a bridge built there. And that pretty much didn't go anywhere. Do you know of anything that's happening currently on that?
No, and I think the tubes are the reason the city hasn't really invested much time in Innabelt, to be honest, because it seems like that's the obstacle that we have to get over in order to literally have to get around it just to have more development down there. So I haven't gotten an update on it lately. And as you know, anytime something involving the state comes up, I've just set my clock to 20 years. And just know that, anything that involves state action is, I took a walk with some bike activists who wanted to build a bike lane going through Innabelt Road into Boston. And the moment we got to state property, I told them, guys, I'm not going to be a city councilor by the time this is accomplished. So I don't want to be so pessimistic, but I definitely think those tubes need to go and we need to do something about it. And if we can ever get the state to do something about it, that'd be a miracle.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Adam Portney and then John Fenton.
Hey, Matt, thanks for coming.
Hey,
So just wanted to bring up, I think some of the issues that are coming up together are the parking spaces, and then a lot of the development. And one thing I wanted to bring us back to is the storefront economy that has really taken a hit because of all of the bike lanes and the removal of the parking in front of those places. So I think if we want to continue to have a vibrant storefront economy in this city, we have to look at some of the, and I think you've done a really good job at this, by the way, looking back at some of the decisions that were made. Say, take Broadway. Does that bike and bus lane need to be 24/7? Or can we look at ways to create more parking on that street and create more times where that bike and bus lane can be used by everyone? And maybe it's just, rush hour where it's the bike and bus lane, because a lot of the traffic and parking issues that you're referring to are a result of all of these bike and bus lanes that were put in around Somerville. So some of these issues, we have to look at them holistically now and say, okay, what have we done? And maybe we have to swing the pendulum back a little bit the other way to create better traffic flow. There would certainly be better traffic flow on Broadway during the day when there's no buses or bikes going down that street. And also a lot of that parking that was taken away, maybe we have to look at it and say, what did that do to the storefront economy, and what things are more important? So I'm just wondering, the things that were put in over the last few years, what do you think maybe needs to be readjusted, like the bike and bus lanes?
I'll tell you, I wrote a piece about this actually. I forget what the title was, but it was basically about bike lanes and identity politics. And I encourage people to read it. It's a piece that I liked a lot that I wrote because it talks about how, just like this, my inauguration speech, people dig in their heels on issues and just refuse to budge. And like you find that the bike lane issue on both sides becomes a matter of identity instead of a practical infrastructure decision. So you have some people who support bike lanes who just don't want to acknowledge in any circumstance that this might have been a mistake or it might have unintentionally hurt people. And then you have other people who, you put a bike lane in and it's an attack on seniors, it's an attack on business, and maybe it didn't actually have that negative impact that people claim. So I do think that it has to be a practical decision. And that's why I view, like, we're working on Pearl Street right now, and people wanted to put a bike lane there. And I ride my bike everywhere. I'm a cyclist. I've been doing it since I was a child. And what I told them is, like, a lot of people just wanted to get rid of parking completely in order to have these bike lanes, but there's a number of houses that don't have driveways at all. And I said, we could easily have a bike lane here if we made Pearl Street a one-way street. And maybe we should do that. And that way you get your bike lane, you get the parking, and you get reduced traffic. So something like that, you just have to find something that works for people. In terms of Broadway, I actually don't think the bus lane or the bike lane has made traffic worse. I've avoided Broadway my entire life. And I think the stoplights are actually the problem there, because you drive up Broadway, even if there's no traffic, you get stuck in 7 stoplights. So I've always avoided, I'll take 93 to get to Medford just to go to West Somerville sometimes. So I think the issue too with a lot of the bus lanes, I've seen bus lanes work in other cities, other countries that have buses. We just don't have enough buses to really make these bus lanes useful. And that's a state issue that I think if we had a bus coming every 10 minutes, then a bus lane would work. But right now it is kind of just an empty space. So that is another one that's up to the mayor. But I wouldn't necessarily walk it back completely, but there should be some acknowledgement that, like, Highland Ave is the next big one. And I saw one of the issues is, like, there was a hair salon there that's concerned about losing all their parking, and they get, all they did was, and they're a big GLBTQ plus supporter, very progressive owned business, and people were disparaging them on social media just for pointing out that our customers won't have a place to park. And it became an identity issue. It became, you're not supporting the progressive cause, instead of saying, can we find a way to have parking and a bus lane and a bike lane? So there's a lot of room for compromise. You just have to kind of sometimes make everyone a little less happy than what they would have been. So if everybody's just a little less happy, then you probably did something right.
If I may interject before John, one of the things that's common through most local government, and often under your chairmanship, President McLaughlin, is matters get a public hearing. If you want to open a sidewalk for 3 feet, there's a public hearing actually before the city council. There's our well-developed zone planning and zoning and all the process and public involvement and public notices that's governed by the state and by the city. Everything we see that's happening now on the streets, nothing since Broadway has had a public hearing. The Winter Hill section had a public hearing. It didn't go so well. The city has not had a public hearing on anything else. College Ave, Holland Street, Broadway, the mobility division will have community meetings where the mobility division presents its case and its slideshows and does breakout sessions and is everything but a public hearing. Because what a public hearing is, and we appreciate it, is the people's opportunity to speak directly to the decision makers. The decision makers on what's happening in our streets are the members of the Traffic Commission. The Traffic Commission didn't participate in the community meetings, didn't take questions directly, doesn't have to because it's a 1978 home rule petition that didn't require public hearings for this. Would the city council entertain a goodwill question from the chamber about holding public hearings or asking the Traffic Commission to hold public hearings before it alters streets? It was the last thing that Mark Niedergang did before he left the commission in December. His last motion was for the Traffic Commission to have a public hearing at every one of its meetings on matters before them. All we're asking is have a public hearing before you alter the street.
Well, I think that public hearings for the Traffic Commission would be better than public hearings for the City Council. Just because I don't like getting people upset and thinking the City Council is going to be able to do something about it when it's another commission that actually addresses these issues.
Okay.
So and we do have a council representative, Councilor Gomez-Mocard from Ward 5 is the City Council's representative on the Traffic Commission. So I can mention that to her. And I would say, you know, there's been a lot of unilateral actions over the years on behalf of the executive branch that I'm sure I've been upset about several things over the past. And, you know, sometimes in pursuit of, again, like if one group is being heard overwhelmingly, then the city's just going to try to please that one group. So having public hearings when appropriate makes a lot of sense. And I do think besides that, unilateral actions sometimes have bothered me. A lot of these meetings, yeah, it's about an hour and 40 minutes, an hour, 50 minutes of PowerPoint presentations, followed by 10 minutes of what does the community think? And that's always seems to be the least important part of the community meeting. So I would like to see that changed. I hope the new mayor changes that. And I think that it would be appropriate to have public hearing. I'm surprised actually to find out that the Traffic Commission wouldn't hold a public hearing on something like Highland Ave or another or any, well, you know, the Powder House Boulevard. I do know that, you know, they have had public meetings on Highland Ave. We're going on our third meeting for Pearl Street, so I feel like people are getting heard in those meetings. But yeah, more transparency is always good.
Thank you. John Fenton. You have to unmute, John.
Sorry.
There you go.
Thank you, Councilor McLaughlin, for joining us today, and excited to work for you with you, over the next few years. And we feel like there's a real opportunity, I think, here to create a mobility and public life strategy that builds on the existing character of Union Square and Boynton Yards. We feel like a lot of the investment has been made already, and now it's a matter of, connectivity and enhancing, those connections. We put together a Boynton Yards mobility playbook that's got a lot of good ideas in it, and we're trying to use that as a little bit of a Bible to help work with the city to create a best-in-class, urban design model for, getting people out of their cars, basically. And I think it's essential. There's a ton of traffic right now. Some of it might be because of the bike and the bus lanes. Some of it, is because of COVID, because, people aren't on the T yet. They're coming back to work, but they want to drive. And most of the traffic isn't yet because of the building that's been built, but it's coming, and I think, a unified commitment, by the city council, by the mayor and the business community to get together to create a interactive, widespread system that again gets people out of cars is what we have to commit to, and we're trying to lead on that, and I'd love to talk to you more about it, but it's something that I think we got to become Copenhagen to a certain extent, and we can. I mean, I think the infrastructure is there, is being built. It'll continue to get built, and we're looking forward to leading that charge.
Yeah, and I think you were part of the compromise that I referred to earlier, right? With the zoning amendment. So
Yep.
that was an example of some people wanted no parking whatsoever. You wanted a little bit of parking, and I think that most of the council was in agreement on that. So, and I do think the thing that makes me, I guess, quote unquote, progressive on this issue is just the realization that we can't possibly make things more car friendly anymore. It's just there's no way. We can't make lanes any wider. We can't build any more highways. There's not much more we can do to make things more car friendly. So we have to go in another direction and just encourage people to not drive and try to build a city that's less reliant on it. I only owned a car for one period in my life, for a 2-year period when I was in the military. And I grew up in the city. I never had a car, and I always found a way to get around. My wife owns a car, and she has to use her car at times. So there's times when you need to use a car, but this idea that we're gonna just continue to do what we're doing and not have the problems that come with it is, I always point out to people, it's like, if you have a problem with traffic and you're in traffic, you're literally part of the problem. So we need to find a way to make things less car centric and also respect that people have jobs to get to.
Thank you, John. Jack Connolly.
Thank you, Stephen and Matthew. Great to see you. I was very happy to see you on the path the other day, and congratulations on the new addition, and wish you many, many good years ahead, enjoying that most important position in your life next to being married to your wife. So good luck with that.
Thank you.
No problem. Matt, it's always been my observation. It's one thing to be progressive. It's another thing to actually achieve progress. And looking back at the red line, orange, and green line, and having been involved intimately in bringing all of those stations into the city, I couldn't agree more that alternative means of transportation are absolutely essential here in Somerville. And as Mr. Mackey mentioned, it is extremely difficult for people to assist the transparency problem when the Traffic Commission isn't very transparent, and it's a major concern for me. I am the town crier here on the College Ave issue with moving parking to businesses, elderly residences, churches, and patients of doctors, all who don't and can't use a bicycle, especially in the middle of the winter, especially on bad weather days. So there are some concerns that have to be addressed. And I just want to mention that, as I understand, and you may know as well, there's a parking study that's being conducted citywide that I believe is supposed to finish in late spring, perhaps June. And I'm concerned about what and the results be made public and how we can all interact with that, because to make a lot of decisions about parking without looking into that study just seems to leave me puzzled. But the key point that I want to make here more than anything now is that why is Davis Square allowed to deteriorate in the current condition that it is? You know, you've been close to Davis Square all of your life. You know the conditions of sidewalks, the conditions of crosswalks, particularly when we want people to be safe crossing. They've been neglected. George Proakis was just on a recent chamber meeting with us and has absolutely insisted that he's going to make it somewhat of a priority. We'll certainly let Councilor Davis know about our concerns, but this is something that I think concerns many of us, not just in the chamber, but those of us who live and work around Davis Square, that we basically been neglected. Assembly, Union Square, absolutely getting the attention they well deserve, but Davis has been, I think, completely disregarded. And I want to call that to your attention because I think you'll hear it from other people, especially as you travel around town, that it's not such a good idea to do. And when people in the community mention to me that it looks like that things are allowed to happen, and I don't think that's something you want to see. So if you want to comment about the parking study, I'd love to hear what you may know or maybe trying to find out, and also what your thought is about Davis Square, and it's basically a low priority issue right now.
Well, I would say as someone who grew up in Davis in the 80s, it's still looking much better than what it was then. So I have been through Davis and have kind of noticed a deterioration. And you were the ward councilor, Jack, and I'm the ward councilor for one. And I'll tell you that I've been waiting the greater half of a decade for some improvements in Ward 1. So it's hard to measure sometimes who's getting the least attention because everybody wants their neighborhood to get the most attention. And they should definitely fix these crosswalks and address these issues. And I can't get them to put a slow traffic sign in front of the East Somerville School after a crossing guard got hit by a car. So sometimes it's frustrating in every neighborhood to not have basic infrastructure needs be addressed. So I'll bring that up with the ward councilor and see what's going on with the city, because I have seen a deterioration there. But as the ward councilor in Ward 1, I'm always focusing on my neighborhood and the lack of resources that we've been getting. And I think that's been a generational issue. In terms of traffic study and all this, like, I do agree, and I am actually honestly surprised that the Traffic Commission does not hold public hearings. I've attended Traffic Committee meetings and have had my voice heard, but I'm a city councilor, so maybe they gave special exemption to that because they should, just like the Planning and Zoning Board, when they consider a serious change, they're required to have a public hearing on these issues. So they should probably do the same with the Traffic Commission. So I'll definitely bring that up.
Thank you. And thank you, Jack. Next, we'll hear from our international politics and lifestyle correspondent in Chile, Bill Shelton.
Thank you, Stephen. Stephen, you described this as a conversation, so I'm going to make a couple comments and then I have a question for Matt. On the subject of above ground parking, right now in Davis, in Union Square and Boynton Yards, in Assembly Square, any developer who builds above ground parking is throwing money away. Land values are just so high now that what you lose by using the land for above ground parking is more than you would make a lot more profit by putting that parking on the ground and building above it. On the subject of the hits to the storefront economy, I have to say I was really alarmed when planning staff presented their draft redesign of Union Square. And the presentation followed exactly the pattern that Stephen described and that Matt affirmed, which is that, you know, a lot of time spent on the PowerPoint presentation and almost nothing on hearing from the public. A lot of celebration of how diverse the opinions were that were considered, and yet those opinions reflected pretty much idiocy regarding urban economics and urban design. Sorry to be so cold, but if that plan is implemented, the storefronts in Union Square are going to take a terrible hit. And I hope that chamber members will take notice of that. For Matt, you know, for reasons that I truly don't understand, it's often very hard to get things done in Somerville. I mean, whether you're trying to get a business license, whether you're trying to put a cupola on your home, whether you're trying to actually move a development forward, it seems to take much longer than in other cities. Years ago, a developer said to me, you know, no is a perfectly good answer if it comes soon enough. So Matt, do you share that perception? Two, do you have any sense about why that's true? And three, any sense of what we might be able to do about it?
Yeah, well, first, Bill, I heard you absconded with one of our former councilors to take him to Chile. So,
He will be arriving on the 23rd.
oh, okay, all right. Tell Mark I said hello when he's in South America. I saw his wife on the bike trail, just like Jack, just the other day when I was walking my son. And I just a quick note though is there must be a financial reason people don't want to build underground parking because no one seems to want to do it. You know, I had a meeting for the Innerbelt development. They want to do above ground parking. I know you and Mystic View are concerned about above ground parking in Assembly. So there must be some financial reason why they don't want to do it because I agree.
John Fenton didn't hesitate.
Yeah. Well, maybe John might have more insight on that because I would prefer underground parking as well. But in terms of things getting done, like, I mean, it depends on the development. It depends on the issue. And there's like 100 different reasons, it seems, why things don't get done. So I think about two projects in my neighborhood, Patsy's Pastries and the East End Grill, which have been vacant for almost a decade now. They were both fully permitted to build, so it wasn't the city that was holding them up. They got their permits, they got approved, and they just didn't do anything with their sites. And there's various reasons. One, the Patsy's is owned by an international developer who I think is just land banking and doesn't really have any intentions on developing the land. And once the land becomes worth twice as much of what he had, after doing nothing with it, he'll probably flip it. And the East End Grill, I don't understand why that happened because I thought it was moving forward and it just didn't happen. So these are examples where I don't think the city's to blame. I think the developers are to blame. But then I look at other things like the recreational marijuana licenses, where we actually, as a city council, I feel created such an onerous process that basically nothing's moving forward because you need to be an equity candidate. The rule is basically an equity candidate gets first dibs and then someone else can build. And they haven't found an equity candidate ready to move forward yet. So the moral of the story is bureaucracy sometimes slows things down, and good intentions have slowed down that process because we wanted to prioritize people who have been hurt by the war on drugs, and that's a good thing. But you can have equity or you can have speed. You can't really have both. So I think I'm telling that story just as a greater example of what might happen sometimes when things get bogged down in bureaucracy through ISD or through permitting or different things like that. So it's hard to say. And then you see other things like what's a good example? I mean, Assembly Square, how many decades did that take? And then once it was ready, like I can't even remember what it used to look like anymore because every year there seems to be a new development. And what was another good one? There's some of them that just seem to happen a lot faster. Even the high school kind of got built in relative speed during a pandemic at that. And then the Green Line took 40 years. So I don't know the answer. I think it really depends on issue to issue. And if the chamber, if people here had insights as to why they think things are slowing down, I'd be interested in hearing that as well.
Well, we'll actually be talking about that this year relative to restaurants and coming out of COVID and so forth. But I appreciate very much Bill's questions and Matt's insight on all of it. Is there anybody else that has a question? We have a few minutes left. How about talking about a community center and the YMCA?
Well, I see Vlad's on the call, and I've been meaning to reach out to you for a while, Vlad, because the Y keeps being talked about. I saw you at the last meeting as well, and I gave a great shout out because we were both Y guys, and it definitely kept me out of trouble, kept Vlad and all his friends and family out of trouble. And, the sad truth that I said at that meeting is, everyone I know who went to the Y is still alive today. And a lot of people who didn't go to the Y and hung out at the parks, they're not alive today. And I think that speaks to the value of the Y. I have numerous parcels of land in East Somerville that would be open to that, but I really haven't heard an update from the city about it yet. So I'm definitely fully invested in keeping the Y in Somerville and giving it new facilities, but I haven't heard of the location yet or the desires from the Y. So I should probably touch base with you, Vlad.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks, Matt. And really, really great to see you. And thank you for the kind words you had for us at the last meeting. And to Stephen's point, yeah, we're right now, we're really just keeping our options open to really work alongside with the city for opportunities that we think are going to make the most sense for the community as a whole. We are very open to helping run a community center as the needs, whatever the needs that we feel we can best kind of help the community fulfill on that front. So I think, yeah, right now it's really just a matter of, I think, us in the city really just, rolling up the sleeves and getting to work and doing what needs to be done to really keep things moving forward. So I'm happy, I can definitely reach out to you offline and really kind of just, have a touch base and kind of really just, take things from there.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, whatever it takes to keep the Y in Somerville, it's too important of a facility. We also lost the Boys and Girls Club a few years ago as well. And it's just important not only to have the Y, which is like a membership organization, a place that, you have to say, well, unless you know Hendo, you have to pay to get in. It'd be great to have just a drop-in community center as well. So I think more than one community center would be a great thing. And we do have 90 Washington Street is owned by the city. We're looking to develop that land. We have the General Installation Building, which is on Cross Street East, which is right across from Chucky Harris Park. Might not be big enough for the Y, but we want to have a community center there. We have the fire station on 160. I forget what, it's a public building on Broadway, which is also right next to an auto body shop that there's been talks back and forth about buying that land and doing something there. There's land to develop, but it was not forever either. So it'd be better to get it done sooner rather than later. So yeah, let's definitely talk sometime offline.
Right. Is there anybody else that would like to ask a final question? If not, we're just over the hour. I want to thank everybody for attending. Thanks for your patience in the beginning. Counselor, congratulations on the new baby to you and your wife, and also your new job, your third term as president of the city council. And thank you for your service as always, and for your leadership here in Somerville.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for coming.
We'll look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.
All right, take care.
Thank you, Matt.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.